Hello everyone! We're doing just a little video this week after last weekend's 2-hour-long Snowbound-a-Palooza. Today I'd like to say a few words about a movie I had wanted to see for a long time and finally watched a couple weeks ago. A movie that you could say deals with people being snowbound. Whether this is just a funny coincidence or I had it planned all along, I'll leave you to wonder. These are my thoughts on the 1993 film Alive, which is based on the book by Piers Paul Read and tells the story of the tragic 1972 plane crash in the Andes Mountains and the ordeal suffered by the survivors, most of them members of the Uruguayan rugby team. As days pass by and the chances of rescue dwindle along with their meager food supply, the survivors are forced to take drastic measures to save their own lives before they succumb to exposure, infection, hypothermia, and starvation. I read the book back in 2014, and I was really fascinated by the story, so when I found out they had made a movie, of course I wanted to see it. This has been a long time coming, longer than I expected, but I finally got to it, and I wasn't disappointed. I like disaster stories, and I like survival stories, especially survival stories set in snowy mountains, for some reason. I don't know why that's a thing that holds particular appeal for me, but it does. And this is like a combination of the two, a tale of tragedy and endurance that's as inspiring as it is haunting. The event was dubbed the Miracle in the Andes. The odds of this group making it out alive under such unforgiving circumstances were extremely low, leading the public and the survivors themselves to conclude they must have been delivered by divine means. Alive was directed by producer Frank Marshall. Marshall, as well as his wife Kathleen Kennedy, has produced a ton of movies and made oodles of money, but this is one of just a few feature-length films he's directed himself. It turned out very well, though. The recreation of the crash, where the plane breaks apart in the mountains, is an awesome scene. It's a knuckle-biting sequence, showing everyone freaking out as seats and luggage and passengers go flying out the back. The special effects here were done by Industrial Light and Magic, which tells you this movie had a pretty substantial budget. Not a surprise, with Kathleen Kennedy producing and her husband directing, and the visuals hold up nicely after 30 years. There's also a great avalanche sequence, and the scenery, of course, is stunning. They didn't hold out on breathtaking vistas. The music, composed by James Newton Howard, has some really powerful moments that enhance these visuals, and while there are a few cues that I thought were a bit too Hollywood, the score includes some beautiful solos for flute and violin. There was something that caught my ears, though, and I then spent the next 5 minutes replaying this bit of music in my head and thinking, what does that remind me of? Where have I heard that before? That's definitely something. And then I got it. Guys, it's Mothra! What? Mahala, Mahala Mosura. The film starts out as an ensemble piece and continues that way for some time, but gradually main characters emerge. At first, the captain of the rugby team, played by Vincent Spano, assumes leadership of the group while stunned passengers scramble to attend to each other to find out who is alive and who is not and extract the dead from the plane. But the true stars are Ethan Hawke and Josh Hamilton, who both give moody but compelling performances. Hawke's character has arguably lost more than anyone else, but is determined to press onward and fight for life, while Hamilton's character is a med student who bears the responsibility of organizing triage and tending to the injured. John Malkovich also has a small but featured role as one of the survivors looking back. His opening and closing monologues bookend the dramatization, and he is the one who introduces the phrase "miracle in the Andes" along with the religious theme. As its source material did, the film emphasizes the player's Catholic faith, and while I myself am not Catholic, I appreciate that the script didn't minimize or cut out this important element. According to Piers Paul Read's account, the players' faith, hope, and trust in God were integral to the story. The film also magnifies the contribution made in a situation like this by those individuals who have more buoyant spirits, the ones who rally others when their optimism begins to fade, the ones who know just the way to cheer everyone else up, who can still crack a little joke even in the worst of times. As important as those who can organize and strategize and treat wounds and work radios, etc. are, you need those bright souls who can bolster morale just as much. As characters develop, certain ones do turn out to be more likable than others, but no villains emerge, and you feel like you're right there with them all, huddled in the wreckage, praying for rescue. I read the book so many years ago, and yet the fact I remembered and recognized so much here is a testament to how memorable this story is and how certain images imprinted themselves on my mind, like the guy with the bar stuck in his gut, and how it was removed, which is ingenious, but, well, when I read the book, that was one part that made me feel kind of icky. And the image of the meat cooking on the metal sheet in the blazing sun. The makeup and hair and wardrobe people did a good job maintaining continuity with sunburns, dehydrated lips, healing wounds, and increasingly more ragged clothing. Meanwhile, the snow around the fuselage gets dirtier. I appreciated the way the movie depicted the debate over what lengths they were willing to go to in order to prolong their lives. The film doesn't linger on the gruesomeness, but it doesn't gloss over it either. This is a significant part of the story, and the script takes its time with the ethical quandary, the emotional difficulty, and the psychological consequences. Alive isn't the only movie about this disaster. There are several documentaries and docudramas out there, including a couple where the survivors themselves recount what happened. And before this movie, there was a Mexican film released in 1976 titled Survive, or Supervivientes de los Andes. I admit the way the 76 film seems to have been marketed, it makes me feel wary of it, and from what I've heard, and what I can gather just from the promotional material, that film is more graphic and grim and than the 93 one, which was released by Disney. I don't think that's necessarily a factor, though. Well, it's probably a factor, but I don't think it's the main reason why they didn't go quite so far down that road. Personally, I like that this movie didn't sensationalize the pivotal scene. It's not an exploitation of the horrible experience. Watching it, I didn't feel it could bring shame to either the participants or the victims' families. The material is there, the subject is confronted, but it's handled with discretion, giving you some grisly detail, but putting more emphasis on the heartbreak and desperation than on the hunger and lurid details of slicing and eating human flesh. Newsflash, if you didn't know before or hadn't figured it out already, this incident contains one of the most famous historical examples of survival cannibalism. I did think the film would extend a little further than it did. I remember the book talking about recovery and the public's reaction when details about what really happened emerged, the mix of compassion and condemnation. But I suppose it wasn't necessary for the film to delve into the aftermath, so the way it concluded was fine. I can't really judge the accuracy of this depiction or of the actors' portrayals of the real people, but as an adaptation of the Piers Paul Read book, I think it's excellent. In either medium, it's a great story. It can be intense, it can be grueling, it can even be distressing at times, but ultimately, it's rewarding. I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I'll be back next week with another video. Thanks for watching.